What's good, cannabis investors? I hope you're all doing great, and I want to welcome you back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jordan, and today we're coming at you with This Week in Cannabis News from August 12th to the 18th. Now, before we jump in, if you enjoyed this video or you learned something, please just leave a like on it as it helps out my channel, and subscribe below, of course, if you don't want to miss any future videos. Now, try to think of these videos as a time capsule. I've tried to put all the news and facts in one place so that you can watch episodes over time to learn about the evolution of the U.S. cannabis industry, identify top U.S. MSOs that you keep seeing pop up that you think will be worth more in the future than they are now based on their current market caps, and take advantage whenever you feel ready. But we're going to start with the great news we got out of Ohio, as 4 days in, they saw 11.5 million in rec sales, which we love to see. We wanted another Maryland or another Missouri, and fortunately we got something close to it. Overall, Ohio dispensaries sold 1,285 pounds of cannabis flower and 173,000 units of other products such as edibles and topical ointments for non-med use, generating that 11.5 million. So it's very impressive. While med sales generated another 8.3 million, and there are many habitual med users in Ohio because it's been a med program for so long. So I'm sure over time, more like other states will gravitate to rec sales versus medical because there may be cheaper products and it's essentially the same medical plant. And I imagine because the demand was so high, the supply shrunk fairly quickly, which caused the prices to rise about 20% from $222 an ounce to $266. And so no doubt any existing med dispensary owner that got approval is very happy with the results they're seeing this far, and you gotta love this quote. Any way you look at it, Ohio had incredible performance in the first week of sales that is on par or exceeds revenues of other adult use launches like Illinois, and so we will keep a close eye. There's lots to celebrate after this first week as the future looks very bright in Ohio. Out of Cleveland.com, just have to share the sad reality of what happens when the Senate Majority Leader still refuses to work in the best interest of the American people and pass the damn Safe Banking Act so that we can get cash in the banks and that people can use credit cards. Unfortunately, Ohio rec cannabis buyers turned away for not having cash, so the sales would have been even higher had, either Sherrod Brown's Senate banking chair or Schmuck worked in the best interest of the American people. And even worse is that Cleveland.com, in their reporting, makes no mention of how the Safe Banking Act would resolve this and how Congress has held the Safe Banking Act up for 10 plus. I mean, obviously it wasn't going to have any serious consideration of being passed, at least for the last 2 years or so, but purposely holding it up in the Senate. You can't make this shit up. They make absolutely no mention of it, just saying cannabis remains illegal, so they cannot back transactions for credit cards. It's just such lazy, awful reporting, but I digress. The good news continues out of Ohio from Headset. Ohio legalization, early results, and so as always, links will be in the comments if you want to take a closer look, but just to bring you to the highlights, median total sales per store. This was, of course, Tuesday, August 6th, once the green light was given, compared to med only the previous week. While med and rec total sales, Ohio, you can pause to read if you're interested. But of course, med only, and then once the green light was given, only 3 days in, but hopefully Headset can keep giving us data like this because this is awesome. Med and rec percent of total sales by market, and then Ohio product assortment versus U.S. market, and so you can see a massive majority of flower here, mainly because Ohio doesn't seem to offer pre-rolls, so big missed opportunity there. While basket analysis, average size, units per basket, discount and item price compared to med, and then rec access, and then average item price by state. So very interesting. And then moving along to Michigan, from New Cannabis Ventures, as Michigan cannabis sales lift modestly in July, as expected, because July is one of the big summer spending months. Michigan cannabis sales for July rose sequentially 3.2% from June, with the increase in days at 287.7 million. Sales were up 4% from a year earlier, the slowest annual growth in over 2 years, but it is still up annually and sequentially. So love to see it. While the price discrepancy from rec and med, because they're the same plant providing the same medicinal benefits, just interesting to see that, as Michigan has really highlighted that, I think, better than other states. While the breakdown here for products, if you are interested, and ultimately high competition leads to a low price for customers, and that's another one of the reasons why this market has become so successful. So you love to see it, and fortunately, or hopefully, more states will follow the Michigan model going forward. But with that, update out of Florida, as Tom Engel shared, 2 new Florida polls find that cannabis legalization initiative on the November ballot has majority support, but only one shows it's exceeding the 60% supermajority needed to be enacted under state law. Now, what's funny is that apparently Tom Engel is not a stats expert, and I'm not either, but fortunately Hirsch Jane seems to know how to do the math and was able to highlight that this statement by Tom was wrong, and both of them actually do exceed the 60% supermajority. Apparently the correct way to do the math, according to Hirsch Jane, don't take my word for it, I wish I had good teachers in high school, but unfortunately I didn't, so I suffered in that department. The correct way to find the answer they're looking for here, and I don't even know the right term necessarily, but it's to take the number in support and then divide it by the total of support and opposition, essentially. As you can see, he's done that both here and gotten over 64%. And so nice to see Tom take this L, because clearly he's a humanities dude and he can be proud of that, a humanities vegan, but apparently others understand that, yeah, this is in favor of cannabis and this is a good thing. So take from that what you will. Let me know what you think about this in the comments. But moving forward, just to highlight Florida sales for this past week, August 9th to the 15th from the Office of Medical Cannabis Use. Just going down to total patients. We've crossed over the 885,000 mark, and new dispensaries were opened in Jacksonville by Air Cannabis, Destin by Curaleaf, and then Newport Richey by Trulieve, which I think we'll get to a little bit later. But main thing to highlight, strong sales across the board, and I have no doubt that June to July will see an increase in sales, even though Florida is still med only, just because it's summer and that typically happens in every market, but we'll have to wait and see. Regardless, total flower sales in ounces by company this past week, you can see the list right here, and here's the visual on the left side. While total THC sales in milligrams by company this past week, THC market share, nice to see Curaleaf and Air toggling for second place there. While total CBD sales in milligrams by company, Certera still leading the way down here. And then total dispensing locations for once this adult use market, the beautiful behemoth, turns on. That is going to be awesome. But more on Florida. Interestingly, this past week, got this at the end of last week from one of Donald Trump's close confidants, Roger Stone. And whether you like or don't like them, it doesn't matter. Ultimately, the main thing you have to see big picture is that if we have an election coming up in November, if we have one side running on descheduling, which will likely be the Dems, if they finally keep their word and do that, we want to have the other side also competing somehow in some way. And if Trump were to come out and be vocal for an amendment in his own state, and while he hasn't done that yet, it would be huge, and it leads us to be cautiously optimistic that Roger Stone, one of his close confidants, is willing to be vocal about it. And he's basically putting this woman in her place. I don't know who Martha Bueno is. Sounds like she's running for mayor or something, but the main thing is she's on Team Desantis and Team Hemp. And so she's making the argument that the reason the Amendment 3 shouldn't pass is because it's a constitutional amendment, whatever the hell that means. And so, again, I'm not an expert in any of this, but Roger Stone nicely puts her in her place. And this has to be done by constitutional amendment because the hidebound Republican legislature in Florida will never put it on the ballot, nor will they ever pass it as a law. Hence why it's had to go the way it's gone. And this is the only way for the Florida people to essentially express their right to want to vote for what they want to vote for and show their support, right? So this has nothing to do with him other than the fact that the hemp interests are evidently financing the campaign against Amendment 3. And we've been learning that week after week as we peel back the layers. If Ron DeSantis hadn't fucked up our current med program to make it expensive, restrictive, bureaucratic, cumbersome, and user-unfriendly, perhaps it wouldn't be necessary. But Ron DeSantis fucks up everything he touches because he's a mutant, which is kind of hilarious. But to build off of that, he just keeps making more and more of an embarrassment of himself, DeSantis, because I guess this past week he painted Trulieve Cannabis Company as Canadian amid the recreational cannabis spat, but like Kim's a Floridian. So he's just making false statements at this point, which I don't think is going to help him in any sort of way. And so the fact of the matter is that Trulieve is Florida born, our products are Florida grown, and our headquarters is in Florida, with most of our nearly 4,000 employees living here as well. And so, I mean, Ron, you can't get dumber than that. And so we do appreciate him making these hiccups. Maybe he's doing it on purpose. I don't know. But I guess his one claim is that how they got on the pink sheets or the over-the-counter markets was because of a reverse takeover from a Canadian company. So that's his claim to... That's likely where he gets the Canada from, but, I mean, clearly that's bullshit. And just showing more and more desperation, highlighting why he is more and more unlikable as time goes on. And so just the last bit on this, again, speculation, take from it what you will, but it's promising in a sense that Trump is about to play the cannabis card against Harris in their debate. So take from that what you will, but I actually decided to click through the link, and it's a New York Times article, and so seems like it might actually be legit, but the main thing to remember why this is somewhat important is because in 2019, 2020, Tulsi embarrassed Kamala and made her literally drop out of the presidential race when she called her out for putting over 1,500 people in jail for cannabis violations, and then laughed about it when asked if she ever smoked cannabis. So that was obviously something worth bringing back from the past to highlight that if they are bringing her in, it does signal that Trump is likely going to go with this angle into the debates on September 10th, and possibly just really try to expose her for being a hypocrite in the sense that, oh, now you're for ending prohibition when you had no problem locking them up when you were a prosecutor. So definitely some interesting points in here if you wanted to grab the link and go through that. But I thought we were at Studies. But no, few other big stories. Now, this one from Miami Herald, there's a lot of talk as to whether or not this publication is credible or not, so take this with a grain of salt. But apparently the DEA official that front ran the announcement earlier this year that they would announce rescheduling before summer, and correctly did so, says that cannabis is set to be rescheduled by October. So plan accordingly for your own situation, but these are the two most important sentences. Mainly, the official requested anonymity, and while we could not independently verify their statements, they could confirm that the person works for the DEA. And the same official accurately informed us in January that the DEA would announce rescheduling before summer, and an official announcement came a few months later on April 30th. And so this says prior to October, which would lead us to believe that's September. And I remember Grok a few weeks ago in one of my last week's videos said September 20th. And so if Grok is accurate, then that's going to be the only AI I trust going forward. But yeah, lots to look forward to as they've tried to expedite this review process, and we're ultimately waiting on a Garland memo and some sort of signal for uplisting possibly. And this was very promising. Take it with a grain of salt, of course, but someone that works for GlassHouse Brands, an executive there, certainly would know more than we do. And now this comes from a longer form video, and I will admit I have not listened to this full thing, but wanted to share this clip as I saw a lot of people retweeting and talking about it. Basically just recapping GlassHouse's recent earnings, but this is a clip from a guy named Mark Cahodes, I believe, asking a question to GlassHouse, and I don't know whether it's Kyle Kazan, Graham Farrar answering, but just listen up.
Awesome. Just wondered if you could talk a little more about what you just did there. Thanks again.
Okay. I'll let it all hang out.
Please
I'm
do.
invested in a alternative exchange called T0. T0 is run by David Goon, who I recruited to run that operation. He was the number 3 in line at ICE, which owns the New York Stock Exchange, through him. I met Lynn Martin and others who run the New York Stock Exchange. I've been down there. I've had phone conversations, emails about uplisting GlassHouse. It's not as much safe banking as it is line of sight to Schedule 3 or smoother. And it's gonna happen, Schedule 3, and the second it gets close, I think they're going to uplist GlassHouse and other top quality companies. Personally,
so don't take it from me, whoever this guy is. But yeah, very interesting development. And so this is that full interview if you wanted to grab the link in the comments. But on to Studies from NugMD. First one, flash poll, regulated versus unregulated shops. And so while we've got data out of Canada so far, I don't think we have a whole lot out of the US just on how much legal markets have eaten up the black market, or at least maybe I haven't searched for them specifically. But good news is how much of your cannabis comes from licensed regulated dispensaries versus the numerous alternative shitty gas station distributors. And so out of 473 people asked, 309 or 65% said all of it. And so whether that's accurate, of course, with polls, you probably have to give some leeway for people lying to want to feel better about themselves or being dishonest or not even really actually knowing the difference. But this is certainly promising because it's in line with what we've seen in Canada when you end prohibition. It fucking works. And so you love that. I feel like that's a low population size, though, for cannabis consumers in the U.S., though, just 35 mil. There's got to be more than that. I could be wrong. But link in the comments if you want to go through that. Well, this one is from TM Pharmacopsychiatry. Rec cannabis legalization. No contribution to rising prescription stimulants in the U.S. Of course. In fact, it does the opposite. And so, not sure the date on this one. Maybe I'm just missing it. But regardless, the main thing is the results in discussion. Recreational cannabis legalization did not contribute to a more pronounced rise in Schedule II stimulant distribution in states, of course. So that likely means it's either steady or it's gone down. And we have many other studies highlighting that it's gone down. And so we can, pull from that some observations. Future studies could explore the impact of illicit cannabis use on stimulant rates and the impact of cannabis sales on distribution rates of non-stimulant ADHD pharmacotherapies and ADHD diagnosis. But definitely interesting findings. Full link in the comments to go through that one. Well, from Science Direct, smoking weed, it gets you over the hump. Cannabis co-use as a facilitator of decreased opioid use among people who inject drugs in LA, California, because cannabis is an exit drug. It was never a gateway drug. So from September, the future. And so just to bring you through the highlights, people who inject drugs, I know this is quite the acronym, I can't get over it, were recruited at community sites and sample reports 57% housing instability. People who inject drugs used cannabis for cravings and anxiety after stopping opioid use to remain in maintenance. Cannabis provided rapid relief from opioid withdrawal, reducing frequency of opioid use. Seems to be the biggest winner. And then low barrier access to cannabis due to legalization facilitated co-using to decrease opioid use. And so many different ways cannabis seemed to help reduce opioid use, which is ultimately a victory, I think, in the eyes of many. Introduction to methods, you can pause to read, but it was 30 one-on-one semi-structured interviews with people who inject drugs, unfortunately. And results, they described that cannabis co-use assisted in developing patterns of reduced opioid use in a number of ways. Firstly, maintain opioid cessation and or adhere to opioid use disorder treatment by managing cessation-specific symptoms. 2, manage symptoms of opioid withdrawal episodically. And then 3, decrease opioid use due to low barrier accessibility of cannabis. But this main highlight, participants reported myriad benefits of opioid and cannabis co-use for reducing patterns of opioid use. Obviously because they're addicted to opioids, and so they'd like to be able to still take opioids if they like opioids, right? And so obviously I think the main takeaway is that cannabis at least reduces that amount, and that's the main pinpoint to look into there. Well, from UNCO, Penn, Northern Colorado, the effects of acute dose of cannabis oil on health and 2-mile time trial performance. I'm really glad they did this study. Quite random. But is this from the future, 2025? No, August 2024. Main thing, you can pause to read the abstract, purpose, methods, and results. But conclusion, these results suggest that an acute dose of CBD, so think 300 milligrams, taken 2 hours before a 2-mile run, may benefit runners in competition by improving anxiety symptoms and decreasing the rate of perceived exertion without hindering performance time. That's fascinating. Like, no shit, we should be doing more studies like this with CBD on athletes too. But yeah, participants, wonder how large was the sample size? 12 healthy individuals. And so very small size, but still nonetheless seems to be more beneficial than not, like cannabis, whether it's THC or CBD, in many other medicinal ways too. But with that, from the Journal of Nurse Practitioners, Medical Cannabis Use and Quality of Life Among Appalachian Patients from July 25th, 2024. Starting with the highlights, medical cannabis should be considered an alternative treatment for patients who suffer from anxiety, depression, insomnia, or chronic pain. Yeah, no shit. Tell that to Veterans Affairs or the FDA or the DEA. Patients should feel comfortable discussing medical cannabis with their providers, no doubt, and increased provider knowledge about medical cannabis use and benefits may increase their willingness to provide access for patients managing chronic conditions in Virginia's Appalachian region. It's always a matter of education, it seems. But main thing to take away from this one, moreover, health and well-being improved significantly after medical cannabis was added to the treatment regimen. That's awesome. Prescription medication use decreased significantly, similar to the past 2 studies ago. Quality of life and symptom intensity improved significantly. How does everybody not want this? For anyone that might be sick or dying in their family or their loved ones, medical cannabis should be considered an alternative treatment for patients who suffer from anxiety, depression, insomnia, and chronic pain. Yet another study finding what we've known for a long time. Well, from Wiley, long-term efficacy and safety of cannabis oil in patients with tuberous sclerosis complex, 3-year results from the Cannabis Oil Expanded Access Program. This one's from August 1st, 2024, and so you can pause to read the objective and methods, but the main thing is CBD Expanded Access Program provided compassionate access to CBD for patients with treatment-resistant epilepsy, including tuberous sclerosis complex, which seems to be the worst type of epilepsy if it's treatment-resistant. Sounds awful. But 34 patients, so another small sample size, but that's sadly all we can do while cannabis has been wrongfully put in Schedule 1 for 50 years, and we're months away from finally getting it out of there and the resolution to the ending the discrimination towards these companies. But the main thing, significance, long-term add-on CBD is associated with reduced seizure frequency through 144 weeks. So that sounds like a huge win, but in plain language, main thing, after starting CBD, 46 to 79% of patients had at least 50% reduction, and 26 to 65 had at least 75% reduction in the number of seizures per month. Up to 13% had no seizures through 144 weeks. Like, It's so criminal that the government has kept this in here this long. It's so wrong. Safety results were similar to prior studies. Sleepiness and diarrhea were common treatment-related side effects. I mean, I get diarrhea anytime I drink beer, honestly, so it's not the weed, I don't think. Key points here if you wanted to pause to read. But with that, moving along to the last study-ish thing for Marijuana Moment, as polls show support for cannabis legalization, rescheduling, and industry banking access in 3 key battleground states. And so this, again, not like it's new information, but highlighting just how much Americans really can agree on this regardless of the state you're from, I think. And so, hate to share this because it is Marijuana Moment, but 3 states, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, only one of them are legal for adult use as of right now. And these were surveys conducted by the Terrence Group and commissioned by Scott's Miracle Grow. So appreciate them for doing that study because it's better to have the data than not. But let me bring it down to the questions, mainly asking, do you agree with adult use legalization, med legalization, keeping cannabis in the Schedule 1, and then cannabis banking? And so interesting findings out of Michigan, where cannabis is legal for adult use, so it's quite normalized there now. 83% said med legalization they support, 64% supports adult use. Keep cannabis in Schedule 1. Apparently 19% of people in Michigan are fucking idiots. And then cannabis banking reform, 67%. So pretty promising, while in PA, not that different. 79% for med, 58% for adult use, a little lower, still med only there, but only 14% of people in Pennsylvania are fucking idiots compared to 19% in Michigan, so that's promising, as they wanted to keep cannabis in Schedule 1, while 70% support banking reform, which just makes sense. Again, you want to try and reduce any reason for violent crimes or robberies, and getting cash out of the bank or out of these dispensaries and into banks is the first way to do that. While Wisconsin, 83% for med, 62% for adult use, and I don't believe they're legal yet, so what the hell is the holdup there? I could be wrong though, correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. While 20% of those in Wisconsin seem to be idiots, want to keep cannabis in Schedule 1, while 71% support banking reform. And so take from that what you will, but definitely interesting findings, and Americans want this to be normalized, and they want to end the discrimination. The only thing standing in the way, sadly, is the government. Well, from MSO News, Curaleaf announces the opening of new dispensary in Destin, Florida. We recap that in the highlight from OMMU, but highlighting that this is their 64th store and 150th nationwide. So good job, Curaleaf, for hitting that 150 mark. So more info here if you're interested or wanted to pause to read. Well, like we saw in that OMMU report earlier, opening a new dispensary in Port Richey, Florida. They don't specify which store number this is, but we know that they have more stores than Curaleaf, and they're likely focusing on what they can control, opening cheap dispensaries before adult use becomes a goldmine for them. So more here if you wanted to pause to read. Well, from the Green Market Report on the Cannabist, Cannabis Co. sets sights on Delaware, New Jersey, and Ohio as it exits 3 other markets. And so I'm not opposed to this, but main thing to recap is that Virginia is what we know they're getting out of, and they're getting $105 million for 2 licenses, 8 shops, and then I think 2 cultivation facilities and 2 production facilities. We also know they're getting out of Arizona. Actually, Arizona and Virginia is included in that $105 million. While Florida, we don't know the prices yet, so clearly they haven't finalized that, but I'm sure we'll get an announcement at some point. And then Washington, D.C., and then also selling recreationally out of dispensaries in New York, apparently. So they're going to be shuttering 2 of its med dispensaries. I'm sure they're going to get some money for that as well. But ultimately, they're cutting down in certain markets, which I'm fine with because I don't think New York's going to be a big driver. I don't think D.C. would have been a big driver. Florida, I think they could have held on with this new recent Virginia and Arizona acquisition. I don't know why they need to get rid of Florida now, to be honest. But they want to focus on Delaware, New Jersey, and Ohio, and then its remaining Virginia market going forward. So, I mean, I still think the company's going to make me a ton of money in terms of where I own them at their current market cap and what they're going to be worth in the future. Do I agree with this all fully? Not really, but I'm not the CEO, right? So let me know what you guys think in the comments, but hopefully I summarized that decently enough and didn't butcher it too badly. Well, I just wanted to share this as it didn't come until mid this week. So, but from my last week's video, this is the Cannavisment's deep dive on the Cannabist's earnings. So minor improvements from the Cannabis Co. in Q2, but cash generation and profitability struggle continues as the team tackles the business restructuring from all angles. And again, I hope they decide to keep Florida going forward if they can, but they're probably already committed to that and likely already through some sort of sell. Regardless, second half of 2024 and 2025 will have a lot of moving parts. Asset sales, Ohio rec online to keep an eye on. And the main thing of growth, biggest driver is going to be Ohio, not New Jersey or Delaware. So we will see what happens with them, but definitely did have an improved showing. And I'm still happy owning, I think it's 11,000 shares at 46 cents Canadian, and they keep creeping up and getting closer, so no complaints on my behalf. Well, another one from Cannabis. This one is on Cresco once it loads. But thank you, Nick, for writing these up so I can share them, make it more easily digestible for all of you. Solid showing from Cresco Labs in Q2. As it has been the case for a while, Cresco has countered a lack of growth by optimizing assets, reducing costs, driving up margins, and ultimately enhancing cash flow, while Ohio rec sales in second half of 2022 and potentially Florida in 2025 are set to finally drive the top line for them again. So more here, of course, if you wanted to pause to read. And that is summary on Cresco. Well, Delaware to begin accepting adult use cannabis industry applications August 19th. Makes a bit more sense. And maybe that is why the push from the Cannabist into Delaware. But yeah, it seems like that'll be on Monday. And then the licensing lottery will take place in October. So still early in the process here. I will update you as we get more news. But yeah, official dates, Monday, August 19th. And then the lottery will award 60 cultivation licenses, 30 manufacturing licenses, 30 retail licenses, and 5 testing facility licenses. So it seems like Cannabist wants to go after some of these retail licenses and probably some of these as well. And I will update you if they end up getting that in October as we move along towards that. Well, out in New York, not the typical shitting on New York and their bad policy as I do, but another one of these classic, whoa, cannabis tax revenue in a town has former critics changing their tune, realizing ending prohibition is not such a bad thing. So just more or less sharing it for laughs because we've seen this sort of headline recycled over and over. Now it's legal, it's here, it's not going anywhere, it's bringing money, adding that still a lot of stigma associated. I was worried and I voted against it. Another example of a person who just doesn't know what they don't know, ultimately. But I think so far there are only 2 brick and mortar shops here. We can do very positive things with that tax money. Yeah, no shit you can. Drug education, prevention, therapeutic programs, new chemical dependency treatment center. Just education, man. Education. And people will get there eventually. Yeah, so it's a win-win. It's great for taxes. People understand, oh, this is why alcohol is the way it is. This is why tobacco is the way it is. This is why we still sell it. Because people can choose to use it, but we also get to benefit from it. It's a win-win, baby. So just need more and more of the normalization and the discrimination ending. But ultimately, that discrimination, big impact on that ending will be the finalizing of Schedule 3. Well, from Georgia, apparently the medical cannabis program is growing fast and getting easier access, which we love to hear. Good news, the number of Georgians obtaining a state-issued card to buy medical cannabis is rapidly climbing at about 1,000 every month, and some changes in the works may make it easier for new patients. Love to hear that. And so Georgians can access medical cannabis for all of these ailments as of right now. And among recent changes made by state legislatures, Georgians will soon be able to have the cards mailed to their home address instead of having to pick them up in person from the health department. And they'll be good for 5 years as opposed to 2. And so more incentive to make people want to switch to a safer, non-addictive medicinal alternative. Well, there's more to the story here if you wanted to pause to read for more details or grab the link in the comments to go through that. Update out of Germany is new data from GKV GAMC shows Q1 med sales covered by the public health system hit 51.3 million, which is up 0.7% year over year. Such dismal growth, it's so sad. But progress. Quarter over quarter, a drop though from 54.8 million in Q4 of 2023. Now, I don't remember exactly how the medical system runs in Germany, though I do recall that if you had insurance, it was supposed to be covered, and I believe that this is highlighting that. And so regulatory changes ahead could shift these trends. Let's hope. And so we're going to jump to that in a moment. But first, I just wanted to play this older one, but it's a 3-minute explanation of recent regulatory changes just to see where they're at for medical prescription in Germany. So I'm going to play this from Alfredo Pasquale. I'm going to put it at 2.5, or not 2.5, 1.5, but
earlier this month, we got some really positive news for seriously ill medicinal cannabis patients in Germany. The Joint Federal Committee, or GBA, has eased the requirement for doctors to get approval from statutory health insurers before prescribing medicinal cannabis for the first time. For context, the GBA is the highest decision-making body in the joint self-government of physicians, dentists, hospitals, and health insurance funds in Germany. Up until now, patients seeking public health insurance coverage for medicinal cannabis had to convince their doctors to apply for reimbursement. This is a bureaucratic, burdensome, and largely unpaid work for doctors, with many applications getting rejected. As a result, the market covered by public health insurance in Germany has seen minimal growth in recent years, with most of the growth having been driven by patients paying out of pocket with so-called private prescriptions.
It's so funny he says that, but like the bars are all at the same level, there's not much growth.
Bypassing insurance altogether. Now, German authorities have decided that certain types of physicians, mostly specialists, including GP specialists, will be able to prescribe medical cannabis that will be automatically reimbursed by insurance. The change means doctors no longer need to submit reimbursement applications. The decision is great news for seed innovations portfolio companies operating directly in the German market or supplying cannabis to it, as we can expect a larger market moving forward for reimbursed cannabis in Germany. But what's the catch? The real test will be how this works in practice in the next few months, because the decision still explicitly allows doctors to submit applications for reimbursement if they wish to do so or when in doubt. Why would they want to do that? Well, because some doctors fear something called Regress in German, which is a risk where insurers could demand repayment for uneconomical or unjustified prescriptions. Submitting the application for reimbursement minimizes this risk. If doctors don't submit reimbursement applications, insurers could audit them in the future and ask them to repay if their cannabis prescriptions were found to be uneconomical or unjustified. We will see how this pans out in the next.
Well, that's not very well designed. Then you need to remove the incentive for someone to be able to go after them for not filling out the prescription. So then more are not going to fill out the prescription and go through the new route. This is ridiculous, man. I just never thought the Germans would be so inefficient when they've been known for being so efficient for so friggin' long. And so I'm just going to click on this because I don't... Okay, that is the video explanation. Yeah, he says growth. I don't see that much growth, or at least as much growth as I want. But hey, this is Germany, moving at a snail's pace, unfortunately. So a few more stories just to share with you before we end off. A bit of an older one, but Chevron's end can help cannabis firms use tax code favorably. So remember that Supreme Court ruling that they no longer have to defer to any agency's decision about, a drug, and why I thought this could be a massive deal. Chevron ending was what I figured could be at least the Supreme Court striking down the unconstitutional Schedule 1. Just because they don't have to defer to what the DEA claims cannabis actually is when it's not, right? So all that to say, I'd love for that day to eventually come once and whatnot. And while we know that 280E is the main thing, that why we want rescheduling and to push that so heavily in order to end the discrimination against these cannabis companies, and so that these cannabis companies are no longer working for Uncle Sam, essentially. The main thing, though, is that this is good news for cannabis companies and their advisors. Because Chevron is gone now, and we've seen many companies start this, cannabis businesses now may have a stronger position to challenge IRS interpretations of 471, which they believe are overly restrictive or unfair. Tax courts will no longer automatically side with the IRS's interpretation, potentially leading to more favorable outcomes for these businesses. Now, this is very promising, of course, because Chevron's no longer in the way to stop something like this, but I just have to find something to pull up and put in here that I forgot to add. Yeah, unfortunately, I couldn't find that tweet I was referring to, so my bad. It seems like it's been deleted because I know I liked it and reshared it, but I think it was Jason Wild midweek saying that he thinks the Boies case could be finalized by second half of 2025. Now, let me know if you happen to see that same tweet too. Why I think that's interesting is, of course, half of you, when you read that or hear that, you're like, oh, why does it have to take so long? But then the other half of you is like, well, from now until then, if everything works out in our favor, this could be a very, very long bull run, and it could be even better than we expected. All that to point out is, with Chevron gone, I don't see the MSOs possibly losing this case. And if the IRS were to go after them for paying 280E, I don't think the Supreme Court would rule in the favor of the IRS or any agency, because the MSOs have such a good case. And whether it be the Boies case that helps them win this, or whether it be, it's the precedent that's a big deal. So just wanted to share that. Of course, once 280E goes away, it's a game changer, changes everything. Well, this is another article I just wanted to share with you all. Implications of cannabis legalization for the U.S. federal budget, CATO Institute. I mean, it's pretty obvious. I can summarize this for you. They're going to save a shit ton of money that can go into other better places, and then they're going to make a ton more money from taxing that can go into other better places. The only thing that I would say is the words federal and cannabis should never go in the same sentence or anywhere close to each other again. Keep it far away. Once we get states' rights, and once we... again, sadly, we're not descheduling. We're not getting out of the hands of the federal government. We all want that, but unfortunately, Uncle Sam will not allow it for now. But yeah, the main thing this goes through is how much money. The sad part is consequences for key public health and social outcomes such as crime, traffic fatalities, and educational achievements could also have both positive and negative budgetary implications. It's going to be the biggest public health victory the government never realized they won. So you're welcome. It's a medical plant. It's a miracle plant. It's done many wonders for many of us over the years, and it's sadly going to do more wonders, making a ton of money in taxes and saving a ton of money, hopefully being able to put those resources anywhere else, primarily education. But full article here if you wanted to go through that, link in the comments. I just didn't want to spend time going through it because I've essentially covered all of the benefits that come with ending prohibition over the last 4 years in my videos. Last but not least, Admindotlaw shared this, and so I'm sharing it because he said it was a very useful resource. Federal Cannabis Reform Effects and Echoes of Rescheduling. I've not watched this yet. I've also not watched the longer interview with GlassHouse, but I plan to watch that later today after Jiu-Jitsu and edit this video. But we'll get there eventually. Main thing is that I'm very optimistic, and And so we can try and watch as much content as we can to paint as clear of a picture. But what we got this week that we've never gotten before is that the same source that was correct earlier this year says that cannabis will be, or rescheduling to Schedule 3 will be finalized by October. And well, whether that's the beginning of October or the end of October, we can't expect the government to move efficiently or quickly. But, I mean, that's less than 5 weeks away, whether we find out if Gronk was right, the source was right, or, you know, we get new developments along the way. But that is it for this week's episode, folks. I want to thank you so much for tuning in. I really hope you got some value out of it. What did you think of the stories mentioned? Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or suggestions, and I'd be happy to address them. But besides that, if you enjoyed this video and you learned something, please just leave a like on it. Subscribe below if you don't want to miss any future videos, and I'll catch you next week for This Week in Cannabis News. Have a great weekend, everybody. Take care.